I love teaching students. I love helping them find their voice and their passion and their pathway. That really excited me. And so what are alternative methods and ways that we're not thinking about that small schools or liberal arts schools that might be able to actually offer to students to go out into the world to do great things through design?
Over the past 15 years, Peterson has taught design and fine art to numerous students at universities including the Heron School of Art and Design, Ohio Dominican University, The Ohio State University, and currently at Indiana Wesleyan University, where he serves as an associate professor and coordinator of the Visual Communication Design program. Herb is an award-winning multidisciplinary creative director, design researcher, and educator with experience in strategic branding and social design practices. After a career working with global brands such as Gap, Old Navy, GM, Urban Outfitters, and so many others, Peterson realigned his practice to focus solely on socially engaged organizations. Peterson's research lies at the intersection of community and design pedagogy, aimed to bring sustainable change for rural America. Recently, he co-founded Marion Design Co., a socially driven design studio that applies design-focused research and education into action in rural Indiana. I know that you'll enjoy this episode of the Design Podcast as Herb and I talk about that interaction of socially charged design and education. Herb, welcome to the Design Podcast. How are you? It's been a little bit since I've seen you. I'm not going to try to do math and try to figure out like how many months, or I know it's been more than months. It's been over a year, but we ran into each other at the AIGA Design Educators Community in Indianapolis, and we were talking about the state of design education way back then, and working together and different things like that. So it's good to see you. I'm glad you reached out to me and said hello.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to continue our conversation, actually.
Oh, most definitely. I looked at a lot of the links that you sent me and the research that you're doing, and wow, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be an amazing conversation. And I also thought to myself, it's a perfect segue, because we just finished the prologue series, 8 episodes on asking what the state of design education is. And we go right into your research, and it blew me away. So we'll get into that here in a second. But first, can you tell all of the podcast fans who you are, how you got into teaching, and what you're doing?
Yeah, I have an interesting into design education, like all of us. I think I studied design as a undergrad, and I also studied fine art. So I kind of had this dual mindset of creating for myself and creating for others. Immediately got out of school and started working in the commercial industry. Worked in advertising for a while and doing branding and identity for retail and corporate brands. And immediately, I think it was within just a few years, realized how easily burnt out one could get. Mm-hmm. And I was on that trajectory. And something inside me had always been tugging at my heart and at my mind that, one, I really felt that there was more to design education as a design student, believe it or not. I remember asking questions to my professors in school about, well, could it be this, or why aren't we doing that, or how are we not talking with people that we're designing for? And at the time, I had no clue that was human-centered design, I think, but I was on that kind of bandwidth or mind wave. But anyway, as I started to kind of rub against my own burnout, I realized that the only way to pay attention to a system that's broken is to kind of go to the root of it and start to think about how to create change and impactful change. And so I had this thought, I'm going to go teach, and I'm going to start at the very beginning and try to help young designers and design minds really think about the world at large, to go tackle the big advertising world out there, as romanticized as it might be. But yeah, that's what led me back to grad school, where I got my MFA in kind of an interdisciplinary pursuit at Ohio State. Or Ohio State, I should say. Yeah. And that is really when I really began to teach design. And I had been teaching, I taught as an adjunct prior at Heron School of Art. And then from there, it was like, okay, I'm on.
Yeah, nice. So almost empathy which is so fitting, because, you're thinking about human-centered design from the get-go. And I mean, I think that starts with empathy. So that's awesome. Yeah. Hey, when I was stalking you over the internet, looking at some of your links and stuff and checking out your website, I seen this digital bookshelf. I thought that was the coolest thing. Tell me about why. I mean, why would I think I might steal it, by the way.
Sure. That's
I
great.
think I'm going to create my own digital bookshelf too now.
Excellent. Yeah.
What did someone inspire you? Where'd that come from? What's its intent? I don't know.
That's really great. I think we're all inspired, right, in some kind of way, and we're influenced by one another, even when we don't think we are. I remember being in undergrad and having some amazing professors. One person in particular, Patrick Manning, who's now at he's at UNM, University of New Mexico. He always was referencing some amazing book to me. It's like, oh, have you read this? Have you read that? Why haven't you read this? More so, you need to be reading this. What's wrong with you? And often, I think it was the amazing ability to be so open and willing to give of the book to me, especially as a student. So I think that influence of that economy of giving and sharing knowledge, like we were talking about a little while ago, that's where it kind of comes from for me. So I'm constantly giving out books, and like in particular, it got so bad with Ways of Seeing by John Berger that I had one of my TAs finally just scan the whole book because I felt like I had purchased so many copies of it that I felt okay to like actually give away a PDF of it to students, because it's such a great book on learning how to see and how to think about seeing. And I think that's our role as educators, and it's our role as practitioners that believe in furthering our own independent learning, but also being influenced by the amazing people who've come before us and who are coming after us. Those words, everything that they've written, somehow kind of affect the way we understand it today, right? Create our own definitions. So for me to put that out there publicly and add to it is a way of kind of nodding to some of my past professors and also nodding to my students today, saying, look, these are amazing books that you need to know. And if you haven't, if you don't know them, why?
Right. I think I've had probably a carbon copy experience of that myself. And, a carbon copy of doing the same thing. I've got a large bookshelf in my office. It's fantastic. My colleague that I work with now, he has not only one in his office, but we have one in our studio, one in our computer lab.
Yeah.
But I do the same thing. I'm like, hey, this is a great conversation that we've had. Come over here, pull a book out of the bookshelf and hand that to the student and be like, you should check this out. Read it if you can, but definitely thumb through the pages. And I was doing it so much that I started losing track of where books were.
Oh, I know it. Yeah.
And I had to start like not cataloging them, but actually taking little notes as be like, okay, so-and-so has this book. So-and-so has this book. So I can at the end of the semester go, all right, semester's over. I need to collect my belongings again.
Yeah. There's an app for that, believe it or not, where you can actually barcode out all of your books through QR.
Oh my goodness.
You can actually library your collection, and then so you just scan it with your phone when you hand your book out to your student. I've learned the hard way too. And I'm the same way. I think that having the books in that space versus just always going to the screen just changes. It changes our thinking, our learning behind what it is that we're looking at, what it is that we're reading. And I think one of the greatest things too is it's a reminder. I think when you look at all those books on our shelves, sometimes it can be daunting, but to me, I always think about the person who is standing there in the moment before writing those pages. What were they thinking? And really like what did they really know? And how much did they know? And really, were they the authority? And was it really all about the accolades and the education background? Or was it just that there was something so deep and so real for them that they had to figure out how to put it into the context of a book? And now we look at it as like this amazing truth. And so when I think that way and I share that way, especially with my students, like that's where you can realize you can tackle the impossible, right? Because Paul Rand did it. We all know that.
Right.
And so many others have too along the way.
Yeah. There's an irony to our discussion talking about handing out a printed book.
Yeah. Right.
And we're going to quickly turn our conversation over to some other topics, meaning digital. I was going to ask you what your go-to book was.
You
mentioned that one earlier. It already slipped my mind.
I mentioned a book earlier.
Yeah, The Ways of
The Ways of Seeing. Yeah,
The
that's
Ways of
right.
Seeing. Yeah,
By
yeah.
John Berger. Yeah, it's a great book for freshmen who are starting to realize that there is so much more than what they've really seen in the world.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great, great book.
Okay, I'll make sure I put a link down in the show notes
Oh
too
yeah,
about that book and about the app. But you're going to have to let me know the name of the app
yeah.
so I can
I'll
throw
send it
that
to you.
down there later. I think my go-to has been Design as a Job. Design as a Job.
Yeah.
Joe Montero, I
Hmm.
believe, is the
Yeah,
author
yeah,
for
yeah.
that one. Yeah, I have so many students asking me about the career field lately, which is also rather interesting. Just getting the uh, AIGA Designers 2025, and looking into that and having that conversation. Yeah, so we just wrapped up State of Design Education, and that's kind of your area of research, right? Because the new season here, we're focusing on research. There's going to be 8 episodes. You're going to be our number 1 episode for season 1, talking about research. So I'm so glad to have you introducing your research. But actually, design education is your thing, kind of, right? Your area of research where you've kind of putting all your energy into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny. I found myself, I think, in academia trying to figure out what my real fit was. I love teaching students. I love helping them find their voice and their passion and their pathway. But what about me? And I finally, actually, as a practitioner, kind of came to a point where I'm like, I'm kind of tired of making, and I want to look at design from the systematic approach. I want to see it from this bigger collective whole and what was going on. And I kept seeing more and more that design as research and design for research and through research, all these factors that really excited me. And I started to ask questions about, well, what's like you're asking, what was the future of design? What does the future of design education look like? Even more so for places in rural America or places that can't necessarily meet all the requirements from the governing body, such as NASAD
Mhm.
or AIGA. Um, and more importantly, what are alternative methods and ways that we're not thinking about that small schools or liberal arts schools that might be able to actually offer to students to go out into the world to do great things via through design.
Yeah.
So I actually had thought about that as a research practice and like what would that look like to actually scholarly write about that and scholarly research. And I kept looking for avenues to do that. And finally, somebody said, "Well, why don't you consider a PhD? Why don't you actually jump in and write something about it?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a kind of a." There's a lot of great writers out there about writing about design, but
Yeah.
writing at it from a place where we can start to create new information and new knowledge that we can then turn around and reshare. That really excited me, and so I was fortunate to find the new doctor in design program at North Carolina State, which has an amazing College of Design. It's infamous. It's known for
Yeah.
amazing faculty and amazing alumni. And so I jumped on board right away. And funny enough, all of the folks there, both in the PhD program and the DDES program, a lot of them are coming at it from a practitioner standpoint, and I'm kind of like looking at it from I've been there. I'm not so much interested in that, but I am interested in how we're shaping the educational models for tomorrow and how that affects the practice. So it's kind of that one step
Yeah.
before that.
I think that's really critical. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have a podcast about design education and
Right.
creating
Totally.
success in that. But I would agree. It's time that we have to change our modalities and look more into our outcomes of being prepared for that next generation of design, so that the students, when they get out there, they're not having to learn all over again. Which is kind of the way it's happened for, I think decades.
Right.
You get that, here's what design's been doing, and you get out there and you start doing what design's been doing, and then you realize, oh, I've got to catch up and do some other stuff, some other learning. And you've kind of put this short little phrase to this, a new kind of university. So, I mean, what does that mean? And you talk a little bit about the liberal arts as well. So I thought that was,
Yeah.
humanities and liberal arts schools and a new university. And you're right, there's not a plethora of these elite design schools. And it does come down to, those average, what does the AIGA say? There's approximately 2,500 of these types of schools. Want to elaborate on that more? A new kind of university.
Yeah. So in my research, one of the things that I found, I started to look at small data sets. So I chose to look at religious or spiritually affiliated universities to start with, that were liberal arts, that housed some form of design education. That could be either associate's level degree or a Bachelor of Arts or even Bachelor of Science in graphic design, visual communication design, somewhere in that kind of context. We looked at everything from Catholic to evangelical Christian and kind of anywhere in between, so coast to coast. And we surveyed and actually were able to pull all those schools under one kind of pool where we could look at what it was that they were actually doing and what it was that they weren't doing, and where maybe pitfalls are actually starting to exist. And what we started to see were the trends of a lot of the smaller schools closing due to just the financial burdens of today in our economy. And I started to look at the quality of education that was coming out of these programs, where you have very stressed faculty, I think is a nice way of saying that, with low monies, right, to be able to invest in new curricular changes, new space changes, new technological changes. And what's happening is the demand of the industry is getting so great, right? Especially when you have AIGA and Designer 2025 coming out, opposing these changes and necessary trends that we need to meet, and you have a program that can't meet them, then what happens? And so my question started to become, what is the role of the university then in this context? Like, are we just having these programs for marketing's sake, just to bring students in because graphic design tends to be the populace for art departments? Or do we really care about the profession of design? Do we really care about our role as designer practitioners, researchers, etc., that are at these institutions, and what we're doing, not just for the students, but for the world that we are a part of? And I started to see, like, who's doing what in the context of community. How is community then also affecting learning in a positive way, hopefully, for the students involved? And so what I have kind of come to is this conclusion with the liberal arts world: there has to be a hybrid where you have both a professional understanding, where there are definitely needs that have to be met, but also new ways of thinking about social responsibility, ethics, humanity, like you were saying. The idea that, one, teaching design thinking, for instance, does not cost an awful lot academically when you think about technology. Now, if you're outfitting a lab with 3D printers and laser cutters and everything else, and running people, paying for people to run those labs, that's a lot of money. But to be able to teach another way of thinking about the creative ability through design, that could actually save some of these programs that are actually on the chopping block. And so I've been kind of preaching the good news that there are new ways of thinking about how we teach design, and that's a new kind of university. But part of it is really for the university to ask itself, what's my role in design, outside of just students?
Yeah, I was going to ask you to maybe fill in a short gap there, because you were talking about that, right? And I think the sad part is, when a university starts asking that question, they need to be honest with themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's so easy to say, oh no, we do care about the students, and we do care about when they're going out to get a job, and so on and so forth. But I don't know if they're necessarily being honest with themselves. Are they looking at placements versus graduation rates? What does that look like? And if there are placements, what are those placements, right? Where are they working? Are the job fulfillment meeting the outcomes of the program, or are they somewhere similar? So there's a lot of those questions. So you were talking a little bit about that, right? And then you talked a little bit about community and engaging students in community. Is there some information in there that you can sprinkle in there to how you've kind of looked at that?
Yeah. So, in the context of the new kind of university in this argument, I think that the greatest asset for these kinds of programs that are really trying to figure out how to advance themselves is to look at their relationship with community. When students start working side by side with community members of all walks of life, all of a sudden the learning is going to take a shift. We all know that the minute you make a project real, it changes. It changes the student's mindset. It changes the outcome of how hard they work. It changes the responsibility to it and their ownership. But there's something about being able to learn organizational structure or business, right? Think about that,
Hmm.
or systems approach of design, because you're working with an urban planner and maybe somebody else who understands historic facade revitalization, right? So now
Hmm.
all of a sudden you're learning grant writing, and you're learning all these skill sets that actually meet a lot of the needs of the trends that are coming out of the designer 2025. So the real argument at the end of the day is that a lot of what both Meredith Davis and the research from AIGA have positioned for us can happen through a social context, which is kind of
Okay.
rad. So if you're a
Yeah.
school that can't meet all these like giant changes physically, or you don't have the numbers because of faculty, lack of faculty, there might be another way to approach it. And so we to really push that into some kind of place. I thought we got to prototype this kind of way of being, and that's how we kind of created our studio.
Okay. So how does that look different from traditional graphic design?
Yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
good question. So, like, I know you were kind of talking about this with Robin on your last episode.
Hmm.
The idea of our classes are no longer just you know a layout class, or the typical we're teaching to a software. It's all cross disciplinary. It's all interdisciplinary constantly, and we're moving into even more so like a mentorship kind of vertical learning model, where you have seniors who are working right beside juniors, who are working right beside sophomores, who are working with freshmen, and then the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, etc. They will be able to break away and go into their own independent workshops where they're learning both the technical and the conceptual and theoretical framework to be able to apply back to their team project. And they all
Okay.
have their own responsibility, which is kind of rad. So that's how we've been running on the summer. When it's kind of outside of the like typical class structure, but we've been moving into this model for the past 4 years here at the university, which is
Okay.
we've taken almost all of our programs and started to just like overlap them together. And what we're starting to see is that we've now improved faculty thriving by not feeling so overwhelmed that they're kind of running one thing on them on their own. They're collaborating together. They're thinking about writing courses together and teaching classes that might not normally make sense because there's actually space and time to do that, such as racism and design.
Hmm.
Or right, how does design affect the way we understand race politics in today's culture? That's a really big question to ask, but it also makes
Yeah.
sense when you have a community that's actually traumatized by racial issues. And how are we equipping our students to handle that kind of problem, not a layout problem, right? Because
Hmm.
you can learn that on the fly at this point, right? Like you can pull up any website, follow any amazing blog, follow any YouTube channel, and learn how to lay out a page, or even make a logo at this point. But to understand how people work and how people think and how people react, and the depthness of problems that our society and our world is carrying, that that takes time to nurture that maturity and I think that ability. And so putting them in this kind of really interesting model has I what we keep watching is the students become mature quicker in a weird way, if you can
Hmm.
even do that. They start to take on bigger risks.
Yeah. I
They
think I think we can do that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and through all these like factors together, they feel like they're part of something that they truly have owned. So their education is no longer this passive experience. It's
Mhm.
actually a really active, engaged experience. And it doesn't look like a class, which is really interesting because if you think about it, K through 12 education in America has been, and we know it's trying, and there are so many amazing educators out there trying to do good work.
Mhm.
And yet the system keeps failing us over and over and over and over again because it keeps us in this funnel, it keeps us in one direction, or it keeps us on this conveyor belt. So our
Yeah.
students come to us and we're like, wow, we got to like reteach you how to learn, and we got to break this like assumptive perspective of like how you get a grade, or what is
Yeah.
a grade, or why are we even worrying about grades?
Right, right.
Why are
Yeah,
you
most
worrying
definitely.
about what you're doing in the world and how this is going to affect something, right? And that you actually have a big responsibility to that. Isn't that amazing? Like,
Yes, yeah,
what, really? There's
yeah.
ethics in this. So to so I think that's very different than my traditional graphic design background that I came from, right? Like learning
Correct.
hand setting type in a type shop, which was awesome. And I think there are moments that you got to bring that back in. We can't
Oh,
let
sure.
go of it. I totally agree. Like there's something about smelling that space, right? When you walk into it. And there's
Yeah.
something about seeing your first amazing digital interface work. And there's something amazing about the first book you actually pull off the press, and you got it right there in your hands. There's a magic to that tradition, and that history is so real and so important to continue
Mhm.
on. But at the same time, we also have to think about what's happening tomorrow,
Right.
especially in a climate like today.
Well, I like to refer to that experience that you just explained as to a human-centered
Yeah.
experience, you know, to actually have, that page that you just pulled off and to be able to touch and feel and use your senses, the smell, the
Hmm.
touch, the look, human-centered. And that's kind of where I think that we're going. I mean, that's even what's in the AIGA Design 2025 as well. Um, I'm segueing. I'm waiting for it to happen. Looking back at my notes, then the thing that I really wanted to ask you, like you said, you've kind of flipped, or almost have flipped your curriculum, and it's taken 4 years, and you're trying to get away from that traditional studies. Like today, we're going to make a poster. Now we're going to make a magazine layout. Now, and I know we still have to go through the critique with the students of their compositional exploration and their elements and principles of design, and is it working, but then we have to talk about those aesthetics versus functionality,
Yeah.
uh, and we still have to go through all those roles. But as you're saying, thinking more about how our design, how our research, and how our overview of the problem, and how we can come up with some kind of plan to solve those problems. So a humanities or liberal arts based school versus a design school, or a program that's within one of those schools of the arts and doesn't really have the emphasis or the classes in humanities and liberal arts. I think it's pretty obvious from our discussion how we can say the importance of the liberal arts studies. What's your minor, right? So I asked a lot of students starting this semester, how many of you are having a minor in your studies with your design classes? It was maybe a third of the class.
Mm.
But then we went on and had more discussion on the trends and what young designers are going to need in the industry, and a lot of them had very big open eyes. And I says, yeah, so is it time to think about a minor? Is it too late to think about a minor? Are you going to study after you graduate from this 4-year degree? um, Really quick, your opinion and thoughts then on the humanities and the liberal arts as complementing our studies.
Yeah, I think that's great. If you can have programs that have the space to offer double majors and minors that fulfill a deep connection to the design practice and the design study, that makes you well rounded. It makes you more aware. We did that for a very long time, where we had BA programs that easily could, you could add multiple minors, or another even potential double major if you could get by with it, with depending on the number of credits you came in. Now with BFAs, it's a little harder because you have to meet those credit numbers, right, to
Hmm.
equal out
Hmm.
that degree. But one of the things that we do is we believe in immediately integrating all the different disciplines. So we're constantly collaborating with business. We're constantly collaborating with communications. We're constantly collaborating with psychology. Constantly, you name it, there's this influence. And so the students are being able to, I think, make quicker connection points from their psychology class. oh yeah, I just learned this. Right. So that's how someone recalls information, right? In a feedback loop, or,
Okay.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, right. Oh yeah, I get this. This is why I would charge that way and think this way from, the business perspective, because I just had this project that I did with a business prof. And, that to me is great. And you could do it formally, right, with the minors and majors, or you could do it informally, like the way we've been kind of tackling it by just making it feel like it's all one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and we're going to talk about that here in a second, and we're going to talk about Marion Design Co. here shortly, and that's kind of the model that you're bringing all this in together under that umbrella, I believe. But I wanted to ask you about this term "back of the book."
Yeah. Well, back of the book kind of refers back to really what I was just saying about the assumption of students today coming into college. A lot of them have learned to easily find answers. And often the answers are printed in the back of the book. It's that simple. And it's, to me, that's really sad because it takes us, I think it dilutes our ability to be strategic problem solvers, or opportunity finders, right? That it keeps us from only thinking that the solution is one way found. And we fight that here. We believe there's 1,001 solutions, and
Mhm.
there are all kinds of ways of obtaining that solution. And that if we do our homework right up front by truly knowing what it is that we're designing for, or who it is that we're designing for, the understanding even the reversal of that, like, what will happen with this in 5 years, 10 years from now, that kind of thinking will radically change that learner. So it's very different than just like thumbing through, which is very freshman kind of like, right? Like, well, so where do I, so how do I do that? Well, you tell me, how do you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And we model it, obviously that's how, we can teach, is by, I think, great modeling. But the back of the book is, I think, one of our biggest issues in today's education, and especially K through 12, where, and I see it continuously. The students
Yeah.
come in, they have this like, it's almost robotic, and you have to massage it and help them like realize like, okay, look, stop looking in the one place that you think is this answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's that um, uh, drawn blanks for my words here, non-willingness, I'll call it, to do the research.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot in the design solutions that are coming in from students to answer problems. They're just making aesthetically pleasing, or hopefully aesthetically pleasing, design work, but the research base isn't there. There's no knowledge. So
Yeah.
I think that's where you're talking about the knowledge economy that the AIJ brings up in their 2025 as well. Um, Thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing in particular is it's vital, if not more than ever before, that we teach students how to truly research, in a quick way and in a slow way. They
Hmm.
need to understand that what mixed methods really are. They need to understand what real big data is. They need to understand the complexities of really drawing out qualitative information, how to triangulate that information, and how to look at that information from a place that truly tells them something, versus, oh, I looked on Google, or I did go to the library. Can you believe it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great. You got some good kind of stuff that you're thinking about here. But
yeah,
how do we know? Like, how do we truly know what we think we know? And
yeah,
helping them to do that. I think that's what is going to separate, I think, a lot of the issues of tomorrow, is with our designers coming out of our schools, is if they truly can figure out strategic ways of finding the information they need, then man, then you can do it. You really can kind of create solutions that impact our world. But if we're just looking, in the first 20 pages of Google, we're not going to get
yeah,
anywhere.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm surprised you went that deep. 20 pages. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that speaks right to one of the trends that we should be looking at as colleges and universities, is teaching young designers to be able to predict their outcome and
Right.
be accountable for the results. I thought that was a great thing to see in that report as well. So yeah, I think you're hitting right on it. We have to prepare them for that knowledge economy. All the key words that's right in the paper that's in front of me that you said would be great for our conversation, and definitely links right in there. So that research then, uh, so you're talking about how you're working with other programs. If they're not minoring in those other programs or double majoring, they're still getting that influence from those students. So are you guys meeting all under one roof in one classroom? Are things happening in the classroom or out of the classroom? So first, let's introduce then Marion Design Co. Because I think
Yeah.
this is the channel that you guys have found to make it happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, a few years ago, it's really funny. All of us, as far as faculty who are part of Marion Design Co., kind of have this interesting origin story of how it came to them, which is kind of cool. Mine, I was actually standing in one of our design studios, beautiful studio that fully outfitted, you name it. And I was teaching human centered design to kind of entry level students, and I had the word empathy in bold, going across a giant projection screen. And I'm trying to explain and kind of suss out a conversation for my students to get somewhere deep about how we define empathy, not by the definitions that we've all been told or what we've read in dictionaries, but by truly understanding what is it, how do we really know we're in it, that kind of place.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but the studio was on the second floor of our building, one of our buildings, and I was looking out, and I could just slightly see across the street of the campus to where immediately there's this amazing line where the economy kind of demographic totally changes. So you go from kind of a household income of 48,000 to literally like 22. And I was looking at these houses that were rather blighted. And I couldn't help but to think about who lives in those homes and who has lived in those homes and what are their stories. And I started to feel, I think, rather kind of there was a contradiction inside of me as an educator. I'm like, I can't teach this to be very honest, like in a context of privilege without it just felt so completely dirty that
Mhm.
I had to do something. So I went to my colleagues, and it just so happened to be we were all having these conversations about, are we really doing what we're supposed to be doing, and what are our values, and what's important to us as a faith-based institution, and all those factors. And I said, if something doesn't change, I just can't do this anymore. Like I'm dying on the inside. And literally from that moment, there were like these amazing kind of lineups where certain things would fall into place. But essentially, the community kind of ushered us into this opportunity to have a studio space downtown on the square of our local community. And we walked in with this idea of doing a project that the mayor asked us to do. He wanted us to rebrand the city, which we were kind of like, we wanted to honor that and say yes to it. But we made a deal with him. We said, well, we will do that, but you got to let us do the research, and it's going to take time. And you got to let us be
Okay.
present, period. Let us be
Okay.
present,
Yeah.
and we'll see what happens. Yeah, and they were cool with it. They're like, okay. So that was it was funny because we were just going to be a bunch of faculty who were hanging out in the summer, working on this cool design project together, and we'd bring some students in. But immediately we became something. And next thing you know, the community kind of somehow a name got made, and next thing you know, a mark got made, next thing you know, a website got made, next thing you know, people were donating money to a community foundation, next thing you know, we're like this organization, and like programming was happening, and somebody had to lead it, and it just kind of like snowballed us into this existence, which has
So
been.
it's almost as if the community was just uh, almost pleading for this to happen, and it just just waiting for that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think part of it was that the town and gown relationship of our university in downtown really did exist, and it wasn't good, and it hasn't been good. The perception of this amazing, beautiful, very privileged liberal arts university on this kind of southern edge of this community that's intensely blighted and has been traumatically oppressed, but based off of loss of agriculture and economy and industry, and you name it, we have that problem, from the opioid crisis some of the highest child poverty rates in our community. And so for us as designers who believe in social good, it's like, well, let's go put our work to action. Let's do it. And we'll teach through doing this with our students, and we'll bring them right beside us. So I'm in the trenches with them, sometimes saying, I have no clue what the answer is to this, but my gosh, we're going to find it. We're going to figure it out. And sometimes it's going to burn and it's going to hurt. And there were moments where, after hearing so many stories of trauma, that luckily we had a psychologist therapist who was who's a husband of our colleague, who would come in at the evening and just sit down with us and say, how do you guys feel? And let everybody just kind of relinquish what they were carrying.
Wow.
But that radically, that kind of space has radically changed how we teach. And as the community started to embrace us, we obviously embraced the community, and it kind of became this rogue thing, because we didn't ask the school if we could do it. We just did it. As you want to talk about research practice, right? I'm like, well, this is what I do. I'm a designer, so I'm going to go open my studio, but I'm just going to collaborate with my colleagues, and then I'm going to bring my students in, and then I'm going to find a way to pay them more than what the university pays our students for work study jobs, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to create a culture and be part of this. And now, 4 years strong, we've been able to radically rethink how we do things, and we've given out a ton of amazing work while valuing our students, not just by giving them free pro bono work. That's not the goal. The goal is that they're learning how to really work on some complex issues. So it's equipping them to be, I think, better leaders once they leave us, and they're radically impacting our community because of that.
That's fantastic. So it's a social design firm for the community. That's
Yeah,
exactly what it is.
right. So now officially, Marion Design Co is a socially driven design studio that it brings community right beside students to work in collaboration from ground up on all kinds of design problems that affects the way we thrive, and that affects the way we want to see progress in the future of our community. So we take on commercial oriented projects, so we will take that project on, and we have a team that does that, and students are interns to that program. And then we have interns that are working on placemaking projects, and we have interns who are working on how to develop a makerspace for the community. And we have a team that's working on actual design research. We're working with other nonprofit organizations in the community, helping those organizations do what it is that they do even,
Yeah.
Better.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it's been really exciting to watch just kind of continue to grow.
Tell me about one of the clients that Marion Design Co has had that really kind of sticks close to your heart. Like one of those experiences, you're like, wow, that's the epiphany of what we do and why we do what we do.
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know if it's one client, because I think every project that we've done has just been so rewarding in such an
Yeah.
amazing way. But I think it's the in between. It's the moments that you can't really predict realistically, even though we're talking about predictive index all the time. It really is about the moment where I'll give you a great little story. This guy a few weeks ago walked in to the studio, and we're public, right? So we have doors that are right there on the square. Anyone can walk in during open hours, and we'll greet them. And we invite the community to come in to constantly share with us what they feel, what they're thinking, what they want to do, what their heart says. I mean, you name it. And we get all walks of life too because of that. And this guy walks in, and kind of he seemed a little shifty and seemed a little uneasy, and was kind of like checking us out. And I was kind of like, I don't know what's going on here, And my colleague Henrik Soderstrom immediately jumped up, and not from a place of judgment, but just a place of welcoming. Literally went to this guy and said, "Hey, I'm Henrik. How's it going?" And kind of created this amazing conversation. Ended up hearing this guy's kind of life story. I don't know how he made that happen, but it was like magic taking place. And the guy kind of walked out, and you could tell he was kind of carrying his shoulders a little differently, right? And so there he goes. And I remember thinking like, wow, I felt kind of bad, because I think I had a little bit of a visual judgment of this individual when he walked in. And it's something that we're always talking about, like letting go of, and being smart, but also like vulnerable to the reality of who we all are, because we all have these like baggages we carry.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, dealt with that. And then a week or so later, he walks back in, and my colleague wasn't there. So I was the one who greeted him. And actually, one of our fellows, we have a fellowship program, she greeted them, but greeted him. But I got to him, and I said, "Hey, how's it going, man? Good to see you again." He's like, I've been really thinking about what you guys were saying, and you're talking about innovation and helping to start businesses. I just wanted you to know I just enrolled in Ivy Tech, and I'm going to take some business classes, and I've got this idea. I'm going to start a business. And he laid it all out there for me. And I thought
Wow.
about that, and he walked out, and I just encouraged him and gave him a list of names of people who he needed to contact and connect with in the community. Um, that was nothing that we really did, and I can't take any credit, and I don't think Henrik would ever take credit on that either. But there was something that transpired in the relationship between us and him, and vice versa. And that is the power when we realize we can tap into that kind of space and then somehow apply design solutions and design education in it.
Mm,
Man, it's a beautiful mix. But for
yeah.
me, that's where my heart starts to race, because I realized that guy was just he was empowered in a way
Yeah.
that maybe he hadn't felt before. And that was just because we were present. That wasn't because we were doing any awesome design
Right.
work or
Right. Right.
had a grandiose logo somewhere. It was because we were just available for this guy to walk into. And he knew
Yeah.
that's part of our studio shtick, is that we hear people's stories, and
That's
we listen. Even though I'm not a trained
yeah.
therapist, and I never say that I am, and I would never pretend that I am, but hearing people's stories and then being able to help them and retell those stories back
Yeah.
in a sense of power is an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. That's pretty moving. And like you say, take that as the introductory level as to what you guys do, and then apply the problem solving and the design thinking and the creative solutions. And man, yeah,
Yeah,
you can make a lot of great things happen with the power of design.
yeah.
Um, I'm curious about how this model looks from like a curricular point of view for the student and for the faculty. Do you do you want to dive into that just a tiny bit? Give us a sense of how that's structured.
Yeah, so one thing is we've fought to have releases because we're running a full-time studio that's pretty massive, right?
Yeah, that
That
was my
that
first thought. I'm like,
that
huh, all
How do
right.
you do that and maintain your full-time teaching position? I don't know. It's kind of insanity. I think that's the heartbeat though, is us being smart and realizing what we've created is actually better and more effective for the outcome of our students than actually just having a traditional curriculum that we're all following here on campus in our particular art and design buildings. And so for us, the faculty, we've banded together to kind of find ways to be smarter rather than working harder kind of mentality. Um, and so part of that is during the summer season, we have a full-time either internship cohort or a fellowship program that we take students on. And the students can come from any university, so it's not just our own, which is really awesome.
Wow.
And and we build the team very strategically and specifically to that time. So it could change. We could be really like super graphic design heavy one team, and the next time it could be really strategy heavy. It could be, and it just is constantly evolving, and that's really important, is that fluid kind of nature. So that's happening during the summer, and we all kind of take turns running different departments and programs inside that space. And then in the fall and spring, we continue the internship programs for any students that are enrolled in our programs, and they'll work side by side with a faculty member who's running their research through Marion Design Co. So like for me, I'm doing a lot of research on looking at data from universities, scouring these pages of the Designer 2025, trying to find loopholes and discrepancies, you name it. And I have a team that's working with me running all those numbers, and they're learning how to do that, and they're also getting paid, which is great.
Hmm.
So the big projects that we have, so students can apply to work in the kind of commercial arm. Those projects tend to create a residual that we're then able to pay our other students working on projects that don't have the money. So it's kind of
Ah,
this Robin Hood almost model, right? Then for teaching, what we do, and especially this year, it's really great. We all team teach. So like all of our classes are being taught at the same time. So then we have them in blocks downtown off of campus. So for instance, our sophomores do take a whole year type learning, even though it's typography and systems, and it's not necessarily, there is a little bit of tradition in there, but a lot of it's about the kind of mobility of it and the way people understand it through a social context and all these other factors, right? That is being team taught with myself and another colleague. And it just so happens that we meet in the studio at Marion Design Co. on Mondays from whatever, 12 to 2. I'm just using that as an example. So together, we will run a project. The project will actually meet all of the class outcomes, but it also is meeting a need for a client or a community member, et cetera, right? And
mhm.
the students learning through it, they're getting this opportunity to like have this portfolio piece. They're also learning kind of this awesome space of creativity and being able to fail fast and being able to kind of move, and yet at the same time learn empathy and the human-centered design process from like day one, which is really rad. So that kind of gives you a little bit of
Yeah,
a, our curricular slash like how do the faculty do it.
yeah.
One of the things that is I think kind of rad, and it might be premature to say this, but we're actually talking about removing all of the different BFAs that we have. So we have a BFA in visual communication design, a BFA in design for social impact, which is really rad, and a BFA in user experience design.
Mm.
And what we've learned is I'm actually so I run the VCD program, but I'm teaching more social impact design than anything else. And there's this like overlap, and it seems kind of crazy to have redundancy, but also to have so many programs. And what would it look like if we just create our own unique BFA in design, if you will,
Mhm.
that is human centered, that is socially minded, yet still gives you the technical proficiencies that you need to have, but it also opens this world to you in a really big way. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the avenue. And what that would do is allow us to teach 100%. So I teach downtown. This year I'm down there every single day.
Wow.
And in the past, we would have to like split it kind of half and half, and people would be running back and forth. And while we are only 2 miles away, it was pretty hard to kind of maintain that. Where now I can actually administer. I could be doing administration work and teaching and meeting a client who walks in the door all at the same time.
Oh, wow, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It it I keep thinking about, the Bauhaus model and how we're, so ingrained in that.
Mhm.
But in a way, I'm actually, thinking about this through, in the moment here. It's still very similar to that Bauhaus model, but it's not kind of structured in the same kind of block format.
Mhm.
It's just, the tools have changed. It's not just wood, metal, furniture,
Yeah.
and so on, etc. It's digital, social media, that the empathy, the humanistic approach. So it, there's still some similarities to it, um, and you even say that yourself. It's still this all immersive experience for the students. So it, true. The Bauhaus model doesn't work anymore, but I think that we can take some fundamentals or some basic philosophies and theories of the Bauhaus, maybe apply them to this model. I don't know. That's just me all of a sudden just having this deep moment of thought, like, oh,
Yeah.
what if? How's that work?
I think we can't escape the Bauhaus. I mean, Walter Gropius was right on, and he had a vision for really thinking through the apprenticeship mastery, the idea of being able to work kind of in assembly, being able to produce physical objects, or you name it, architecture, drawing, painting.
Yeah.
Um, all those, and even the workshop model. The Bauhaus has been so important to us as design educators. Yeah, at the same time, I think the hidden mystery of the Bauhaus for all are the stories that we seldom hear. It's the story of the parade that happened when They were kicked out of Weimar, and they decided to, protest nicely, in this amazing physical, what I would call pop-up meets placemaking or even placekeeping kind of initiative to the train on their way to Dessau. Like
Yeah.
what was going on there that was so important. And same thing goes for, after the Bauhaus with Black Mountain College. Why did it not succeed? And we know a lot of it has to do with finances, but there's a spirit inside all these amazing schools that have existed. And I think we all have a spirit somewhere. Sometimes we
Yeah.
lose it,
Yeah.
but it's being able to harness it and maybe ask these certain kinds of questions. So how does the Bauhaus influence us still today? But also, who are we today? And what is our unique thing? Not because we have to say it for branding or marketing purposes, but because we really do exist in this kind of context very specifically because where we are in our community, there is a very beautiful fingerprint that is solely its own. And if I can speak and teach and learn and grow and be part of that fingerprint, then I'm unique to that. And the same thing. So I don't know, like often folks will ask us, so how do we do something like Marion Design Co. in our community? And I always kind of, that's a hard question for me because I always want to say, well, what does your community need?
Right.
And what is your, I don't know. And there's been 1,001 different models of creating professional practice studios for students and design curriculum and making internships mandatory. Those things are great. But I think it's maybe asking that bigger question about, well, who are we? What is our relationship to our community? The the fact that we are people independently makes us unique. So your experience and your background, Pete, makes where you are truly unique, just like mine. And when I combine that with my amazing colleagues, then
Mhm.
we are, and then our amazing students, we have to think of it from that
Yeah.
people point of view first. But
It's
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to tell some people that it just may not work for you.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
because I don't know any design educator that would turn down that opportunity to have that kind of a model. But
Yeah.
it just may not be suited for everyone. But like you say, you have to kind of see what's going on in your community. Who do you have in your community as design educators? What does that team look like?
Yeah.
And I really love this conversation now because we're in a global economy, a global communication world, but yet here we are talking about shop local in a way,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And I
Yeah.
think it's so beautiful. And I think that's even more challenging maybe for our young designers to enter that. But I think it's an important message to get out there.
It,
Man, yeah, go ahead.
in regard to the Bauhaus with that, I think one thing and you just totally hit on it, is there came a point where Weimar no longer needed them. And Gropius realized it too. That's why he decided to move to Dessau and to build the complex that we kind of now all really think of when we think of the Bauhaus. But there's that tension inside there, and there may be that tension in all of us. I think as far as how we understand what the community needs and how we're able to meet those needs as design educators. Um, I hope that we don't ever lose our welcome, but that may happen one day. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The climate's changing.
Mhm.
Uh, what we have to be thinking about is where we're centered with our teaching, that human centered, human focused teaching, and
Yeah.
so much has changed, and it's going to keep changing. So
Oh, completely. Yeah.
it's been a great conversation. I know that you and we could go another hour easily and
Mhm.
talk about this. But I think I want to leave people the opportunity to kind of process what we've talked about. And I think it'd be awesome if they are able to reach out to you. Are you open for people saying, "Man, this was great. I would love to talk to you more"?
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
that could open up a floodgate of of email. Uh,
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Yeah.
that's all right. Where can they reach out and find more?
Yeah, you guys can, anyone can get a hold of me at Herb Vincent Peterson. That's my Twitter handle on Instagram, and herb.peterson at indwes.edu is my university contact, and definitely at Marion Design Co. or mariondesign.co for our website. there's all kinds of ways of connecting with us. We love to connect with everyone, and we're definitely passionate about the future of design education and research, and really how we're shaping that. What will it look like in 20, 30 years from now?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pete.
I didn't mean to cut you off there. You were doing so well. Yeah, I'm even going to have questions for you. You know, I might send you interns from our university. Who knows?
Love it. Absolutely.
That'd be awesome. I'll leave all that information too in the show notes. So if anyone's missed it or they're scratching their head and trying to write it down, just look down the show notes for that stuff. Next time I get up that way, I head through often. Next time I get up that way, I'm going to take a small detour when I see the sign for Marion and Wesleyan College and come knocking on your door.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come visit.
You got it. All right. Thanks, Herb. I hope you have a wonderful day. We're going to come back, I think, in another episode in the future and talk more about your developments and the research you're doing.
Awesome. That sounds great.
That's perfect. Thanks so much.
All right.
Take care, man.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. The Designed Podcast website is located at thedesignpodcast.com. There you can find notes on the episodes, links to our guests, links to resources, and more regarding the many things discussed during each show. If you find the Design Podcast interesting and informative, please subscribe on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast service. You can also follow the Design Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our video version of the podcast on YouTube. Please join us for the next episode of the Design Podcast, and let's continue to create success in design education.